All right, what's going on, guys? So I want to do a follow-up video on my Pixel 7 Pro experience and address some things. But we always have to address our sponsor first. Nobody. So I read through every comment on that video, which at the time was hovering around 400, and I counted all the comments of people who had a good experience with the Pixel 7 Pro or Pixel in general, and those who had a similar experience to me, and it was pretty split. There was a lot of content in that video, and there was more importance than the phone itself, and I think most people were just fixated on calling out that I obviously have a faulty or defective or a fake device, which I'm still on the fence about, but I do want to clear up the whole fake device thing. I always buy my products and do an unboxing on my channel. I always give credit where credit is due. So this is in fact a real Pixel 7 Pro. Someone left a comment that this looks fake because the back looks light blue or blue on their screen. This is in fact the white, snow white color on the Pixel. The other thing that I want to address is people are saying that my home screen doesn't look like the traditional home screen, and that's because I use the Nova launcher. Personally, I find the user experience to be much better, and it's because I don't like how on the Pixel launcher, the search bar at the very bottom is fixated there, and then your apps are kind of in that middle stage in the font and how the text gets cut off for certain apps. I'm not the biggest fan of it, and I just like how things are more spaced out. And basically I have a better user experience on the Nova launcher, but it's still very close to the Pixel experience. But I already did my RMA for the device. I have it here. So this is a real product by Google. So for the comments that are saying that I got scammed or that it's fake or I'm purposely using some device that looks like the Pixel 7 Pro, no, this is valid. The serial number is valid. So Google approved this phone at some point. However, there is a group of people that I still want to discuss because, like I said before, 50% of people were saying that it's it's defective, it's faulty. But there is another group of people who, in the comments, have similar experiences as mine, which begs the question: do all these people have faulty products? Do we just have to play the lottery and keep swapping out our device until it works at its intended price point? And that's why, as much as I love a product like the Dell XPS, Dell's quality control is absolutely terrible, along with their customer service. And that kind of relates to how I feel about Google's latest Pixel phones, how they have terrible quality control. Sure, you might have a phone that is a good experience for you, but if another half or another majority of the people, I don't want to say majority, but basically if another section of the people are having a terrible experience, you can't really, there's no invalidating either person's experience, right? It's just Google needs to have consistent quality control and put out products that last a good amount of time, which I don't think they have that in mind when making the Google Pixel series. But the crux of that original video was that Google is playing in a flagship territory without offering a flagship experience or ecosystem. And I feel as though Google and OnePlus at the time, they are doing it because they don't want to miss out, not because they actually want to make a premium device. And the reality is, and I know a lot of people are saying they don't like me talking about Apple or Samsung, but they are pretty much the kings in the territory of the mobile market space. And you have to realize that Apple and Samsung are primarily a consumer electronics brand. Google, for the most part, is a really good search engine, an advertising company, productivity apps here and there with Gmail and Google Calendar, and now evolving to the AI space, but they don't really focus on consumer electronics. That's why I feel as though Apple and Samsung have the real edge there on getting people to buy into their products. And that's how they can charge those high prices. And I don't want people to walk away from that original video thinking that I hate Pixel or Google altogether, because as a matter of fact, I actually have the Pixel 7a and I love this device because it's what Google does best. I think their non-Pro and A series is where they shine because it goes back to them offering that value at a compelling price point. It's like but companies like Google and all these other manufacturers are trying to get a piece of that pie in that premium category, but once you get to that upper echelon, it's really hard to move someone off of an existing brand. You know, I'm a Nigerian, and a lot of people like to think that, you know, Mercedes-Benz is the pinnacle of cars. Like, once you get the Mercedes-Benz, you've made it. I understand. Personally, I'm not the biggest fan of Mercedes-Benz, but you can't deny that the experience that you get from Mercedes or these German auto manufacturers is second to none compared to, you know, these American brands or these other Asian brands. That's what people are also wanting. They're not just buying the car, they're buying the brand, they're buying the experience. And that is where Google, I feel as though, is kind of falling off, and they don't need to be entering that market until they establish themselves at, you know, the very beginning. They have a core audience. And I believe Google started off strong with the first two Pixels they had, the XL models. Things got a little bit bumpy with the 3 and 4, but they picked it back up with the 4A and the 5. Phones that I have sold to my friends and have personally recommended to my audience. And even though my Pixel 4A video with less than 1,000 views is singing song and praise about the 4A, despite how cringe my videos were back then,
I can confidently say, without a doubt, this is the best value Android phone you can get on the market today. I mean, this phone, this thing, this device, to access the internet for $350 and all the other features you get with a good camera, it's just so hard not to recommend this phone to friends and family.
I still hold the same values on how I do video reviews for smartphones, and it's the experience of using the phone. And I would say since that time period of Google and the Pixel, it seems as though they kind of gave up and said, okay, let's just go all in with this camera thing and gloat about it because that's what we do best. When, once again, a phone is so much more than the camera itself. It's the experience, it's the ecosystem, it's the customer support, it's the vision of the company. Like I said, it's more than just the camera. And when you're offering such a high price tag, it's already a given of, you know, the camera is gonna be good. What else are you offering? What else are you bringing to the table? And that's where Google falls short for me. And I think the reason why there is such a split between the Pixel series lately, at least from what I've seen from the comment section of my previous video, is the Tensor chip. And people say that I'm some Samsung fanboy, but when they were producing their Exynos or Exynos chip, however you want to pronounce it, I was screaming, saying, like, how could they offer a product at this price point? When your phone reaches $1,000, you already know your phone is going to be inspected with a fine comb and magnifying glass because people are going to ask the question, is this phone actually worth $1,000? 9 times out of 10, I mean, no, those phones aren't worth $1,000. It's not fair to market this as the best and most powerful Android device in your lineup, but you're still using your own chips that are objectively and have been proven to be worse than Snapdragon phones in your Note series. In terms of price, man, this phone, honestly, in my opinion, shouldn't even exist at all if you're gonna call it a Note phone, because it's not only an insult to the consumer, but it's an insult to your Note lineup in general. And guess what? They learned their lesson and went back to Snapdragon, and Samsung has improved dramatically. Like I said before, the Pixel 4 and the 5 were amazing phones by Google with their software on top, and guess what? The chip was a Snapdragon. But the competition was also less back then. The Pixel 6 and the Pixel 7 are the first generation chips by Google with the help of Samsung, of course. There are going to be rough waters, and I just so happened to go through a 50-foot tsunami wave back to back to back throughout my entire week using the phone. Whether it's defective or not, you know, I think it really comes down to the inconsistency of the Tensor chip. Now, I'm gonna take off my imaginary consumer hat and put on my tech review business hat and say, as a company, you want to sell your customer that despite this being a first generation product going to your own processors, you won't be able to tell a difference from the previous models. And I would argue that I have had a better experience, a better Pixel experience on my older Pixel devices than I do with the newer ones with the Tensor chip. And I want to say that I hope Google keeps the Tensor chip, not because I want them to fail, but because it takes time to be great. The Pixel 6 to me was like a reset button for them, and they're basically starting at ground zero with their devices. It's gonna take time for your Tensor chip to be on par or offer the same performance as the Snapdragons that are out in this day and age. The A series by Google have always been some of my favorite Android devices. Sure, there are some bugs and glitches, but it's expected at that price point. I feel as though for their non-A and Pro devices, it just exacerbates the bugs and glitches without offering anything more than a better camera. But your competition also has pretty good cameras. It's more or less, what kind of camera do you want? Do you want a warmer camera? Do you want a more natural camera? But you have to take all that into consideration. Your competition is offering some heavy hits in that category as well. And I mean, the chip is still using the same one as their A and budget lineups. And as a pro customer or an enthusiast customer, you want to feel special. You want to feel exclusive. And to some extent, Google isn't offering that. And if I were at Google, I would say keep the Snapdragon in your Pro phones. I know you're trying to maximize margins, but I do believe most of the problems by Google lately come down to their own Tensor chip. I mean, the efficiency, the performance, Qualcomm has perfected that, or at least they're the king right now in the non-Apple mobile space. Keep the Tensor chip in your A series or even in your non-Pro devices. But once you feel like you can offer the same, if not more than what your customers are used to, then move over to your Tensor chip in your Pro lineup. I hate making these comparisons with Apple, but you have to give credit where credit is due. I mean, they didn't start off with their own chips when they wanted to make that move to Apple Silicon. First, if we go way back, they started off with PowerBC, then they moved over to Intel, but in the lab, they were working on their own chips. And when the time was right, they moved away from Intel and x86 to Apple Silicon and ARM. And once they realized they had the same offering, then they put it in their main lineups. And look how wildly successful Apple is with their MacBooks. Also, look at Tesla. When they first started, they relied heavily on Intel and NVIDIA, well, mainly NVIDIA at the beginning, but once they realized they can offer better with their own chips and their customers won't notice, they moved on, and look how wildly successful they are in the electric space and software compared to everyone else. And I feel as though Google and Samsung jumped the gun, and Samsung definitely got burned for trying too early, and they learned their lesson and went back to Snapdragon because the premium category is cutthroat. I don't think people realize that. Like, maybe you're watching all these videos online, but when you're spending a lot of money on something in certain categories, you will have a bad perspective on the brand if you personally have a bad experience. I do feel as though as a tech creator, I kind of dropped the ball because you guys are right. I probably should have went back to Google or talked to them and be like, hey, having a problem with my devices. I don't think this is normal. Can you guys give me a new one? But in the reality is, in this premium category, people probably aren't going to swap out for a new device. They're going to a different brand. No one has time to play the lottery because it's expected to have some level of quality control and assurance. And maybe using Tesla isn't the greatest example, but you get where I'm coming from. You know, another good example is my TV. It's TCL. You got to play the lottery to get a good panel. But from TVs like LG, Sony, Samsung, you don't play the lottery because it's expected for the price you're paying. You're going to get a product that's pretty pristine out the factory. I don't think that's the case with the Pixel 7 Pro series or the Pro series at all by Google as of late. I'll leave this off with, I'll have a follow-up video of the Pixel 7 Pro whenever Google decides to send me a fix or a replacement. I'll document that process. I'll have a video on my Pixel 7a. Once again, I think the A series is where Google should focus their attention on because the price point and the offerings here is really hard to beat, and I would actually recommend this phone if it's offered in your area. I know for my international audience, Google's basically non-existent. So, you know, Google, if you're really focusing in the North American market, mainly the US, you gotta bring heavy punches because Apple is pretty much king here and Samsung is basically clawing at Apple to get some market share here. So you gotta offer more than just a good camera and a Pixel experience. You need to build out your brand, build out your ecosystem, then we're talking. So hopefully this clears some things up, and to some level as a content creator, once again, I feel as though I let my audience down by letting that video out. But like I said before, it's a 50-50 split. Whether, you know, half the people say their devices are smooth, half the people say they have similar experiences as me, I don't see that coming from Apple or Samsung. If anything, it's magnified whenever it's come over to the Pixel series. Google's trying to compete with the big guys. I just don't think they're ready yet in that premium category. Hopefully you guys found this video informative. I appreciate every single sub, like, and comment. And as always, guys, much love. OnePlus also got burned as well. Just want to put that out there. You know, they were a great company from the get-go, kind of like the Google Pixel series. And then they kind of lost their way, and now it's sort of in limbo. But, you know, stay true to your morals or your vision as a company, and, you know, your fans will follow you to the end.